Okay, folks, welcome to this coach conversation. Obviously, you know who I am. I'm Russ Smith, and this is our second coach conversation for grassroots coaches, students into the game under Black Country Coaches Club that link in with our technology partner, BRM Solutions today. And I've got a great guest with me today. And he's a guest who I've kind of known for, 16 years, maybe 2005 is when I first came across this guy. And a very nice guy he is. So, with that in mind, Gareth Jennings, please say hello.
Hi, Russ. It's good to link up with you again. Yeah, I think it was about 15, 16 years ago that we spent a bit of time together and maintained that contact ever since. So it's good to link back up and get some of my journey.
And this is the key here, really, for any coach out there, whether you be a grassroots coach or in a club or a student. Networks everything, really. And if I were to share with you, there was a program that I used to work on where I came across Gareth, which was called the UEFA Hat Trick Project. And this project was about getting more people playing, more people educated through football, but also more people becoming coaches. And this was kind of my first job at West Bromwich Albion. And Gareth, you had a similar type job in Warsaw, wasn't it? That's where we linked.
Yeah, so obviously we worked on the same project, but they'd got a number of different partnerships across the country. So I was based in Warsaw with New Deal for Communities there, and I think for me it probably really opened up my eyes as a coach, to be honest, in terms of all the different sectors within a community that coaching could really touch and affect in the role.
Well, and this is what we're going to unpin a little bit, because to take us on our journey, guys, could you tell us what job you do now? So 15 years on, what is your job now?
Yeah, so I'm head of technical leadership at FIFA. So I oversee all technical directors in member associations, so football associations globally. So we've got 211 technical directors around the world. So I oversee them from a national perspective, so from an international perspective. And then also we sort of do diversify a little bit within some federations where I oversee the club technical directors as well.
So this is really fascinating for me, and it will be for you listeners as well. So I've just started off by letting you know, Gaz used to work in very much community grassroots football with, myself and some of the bits where you guys might be coaching now. But let's roll on 15 years. He doesn't work for FIFA, the game. He works for FIFA as a technical leadership with all the FAs around the world. And this is a really interesting journey of where, coaching can take you. So I think maybe, Gaz, if you're right, should we start at the start? How did you get involved in coaching?
Well, I think the sort of first part is I'd been a player when I'd come out of school, so I was really fortunate. I managed to get a YTS contract, so an apprenticeship with a professional club, which was Stoke City, and just obviously I think at that point my head was definitely that I was always going to be a player. I wanted to play professional football, and I managed to get a professional contract, which is great. However, just a few months after signing my first professional contract, had an injury, dislocated my hip, and really had to think differently about what was going to be next, and how I was going to establish myself having a career. I certainly knew I wanted to stay within the game, but when I'd been doing my apprenticeship, I'd certainly picked up this probably passion for wanting to coach and develop people. So 2 nights a week, I started volunteering in local clubs, but also in our Centre of Excellence at Stoke. So I think that was really where it sort of gripped me in the first place to want to become a coach. And then obviously once I'd got injured, I then had to try and find my way a little bit. And I think I thought, I've had an apprenticeship as a footballer. I've signed a professional contract. I'll just make my way in the game and become a professional coach. And it's not that easy. You have to put yourself you have to put yourself out, and you know, I found myself doing a lot of voluntary hours at different sports clubs, and not just doing football either, doing a range of different sports, ones that I perhaps wasn't great at, but just loved being around the sports environment, loved watching people develop, and probably built up a passion for yeah, not only people becoming footballers, but actually just progressing within the game, or really contributing to their lives. So I think the role at New Deal for Communities was probably even though I'd done some voluntary work before that, and I'd worked with some clubs. So I'd worked with West Bromwich Albion doing some voluntary work around their community programme. I think New Deal for Communities was the first time where I'd sort of say, right, I was full time in a job where I can really, obviously I wasn't coaching all the time because there was a lot of a sort of an administrative and management part to that role, but there was a real opportunity to almost sort of see like where life linked together through coaching.
I think
Go on, sorry.
Similarly to me, as an example there, it kind of was our first job, wasn't it? That was a proper job that was football themed, rather than as maybe a lot of us starting out, we had a little bit of coaching here, maybe an after school club, or like you said, you might have coached something else. There might have been lots of bits that made coaching. And then that first job that was football themed was really important, wasn't it? Because our outcomes weren't measured on how many players we made. It was often how we changed lives. And do you think that that was an important part that helped you develop your kind of own coaching outlook on things, and how you've developed, obviously, to where you are now?
Yeah, definitely. I think I obviously know quite a lot of people in the professional game now that coach, and a lot of the time I almost think they've got some pieces missing from being the most rounded coach they could possibly be. And I think I picked those up doing the work with New Deal for Community, doing voluntary work. And I still try and maintain that now, you know. So like during lockdown, I did some work with our local girls team, our local village team where I live, because it was the only access that I'd gotten. I was desperate to be on the grass again. So I think those pieces of work, when you look back at them, they're probably the bits that you're inspired by and give you some different ideas. And it's probably the grassroots coaching and the voluntary work that you do, I think it's probably the sort of most diverse groups that you work with in terms of the scale of where they are, in terms of being players or why they're at your session. I think, you know, that diversity, and then having to be adaptable to individuals, having an appreciation of why they're there and how much they can develop, and giving you probably some of those additional skills. So outside of the coaching bit where you're learning different techniques as a coach, I think those things make you humble as a person as well, and teach you how to interact and communicate with people. So for me, it's almost part of your leadership development or personal development as well. So it's not just about the sort of coaching bit. I think they sort of add to later life in terms of what careers you're going to go into. I think it's almost this support mechanism. So yeah, it's, for me, it was a fantastic starting point, and probably one that's probably similar to yourself, for us, where you probably look back at it now and think, oh, what a great foundation that was. But having that understanding that, do you know what, I can't ever forget that, and I need to still revisit grassroots football and volunteer myself for different types of experiences all the time, because that's going to help keep me growing as well.
Absolutely. Football does, you know, change lives as well as improve people's technical ability, and I think that people side of it's really important. For anyone who knows me, my philosophy is people centered, and if you can help the person, you can help the player. It's kind of an approach, really. But if we build a little bit on that then, Gaz, and say, well, along the way, you would have had to have done some learning, whether that be a course, whether that be a qualification, or whatever it is. How did that help you, but maybe more specifically with help you to learn stuff, but learn and meet other people? That network when you were learning to get your FA badges as an example, because many of our listeners will be maybe level 1 coaches looking to level 2, or maybe want to do more. Did that help you develop, and does it still help you now?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important, because I probably didn't feel like I started to learn how to learn until I was doing those qualifications. So when I was at school, I did really terrible in my GCSEs. They're quite easy to remember. I got 2 Ds, 2 Es, 2 Fs, and 2 Gs. So it wasn't great in terms of education, and probably struggled with the way I was educated. I wasn't really inspired by the school that I went to. Only had an interest in football. So I think when I started doing the coaching qualifications, for me, it was almost a bit of a light turning on, where I went, oh, do you know what? I actually feel probably cleverer than I did at school, because I was like, I understand this. I understand what they want me to get from it. I understand why I'm going to have to read different articles, or I'm going to have to observe certain coaching practices, or look at the elite game and where it links with the amateur game, and what some of the stepping stones are in between. So I think in terms of a learning process for me, that was a huge part. And then I think that probably inspired me to do some sort of more formal education. So as part of my journey, I think as I was doing my coaching, there was a real understanding that I understood the game, and I really understood the concept of what people's roles were, where it fitted in a game scenario, how I could transfer that into a smaller practice area. The bit I probably struggled with was, right, well, how am I going to transfer this knowledge to the individual? I sort of knew it in my own head, but then being able to explain it and put it in the right format to people. So I was sort of quite focused in, right, I need to do some sort of coach education training, or some sort of teacher training. So that became a real focus for me to say, right, well, how do I become a qualified teacher, so that it's going to contribute to maybe becoming the most rounded coach that I could possibly be. So I went on a pathway really to try and achieve that, aligned to me continuing as a coach and trying to pick up loads of these different types of experiences. And then, you talk about the network that you build up when you go on these courses. So I ended up doing a number of different courses at 2 separate universities. So I did a course at Warwick University, and I did a course at Oxford University, and they were completely different sort of subject areas. And people came from, so because they weren't coaching, and I'd sort of been in that coaching bubble, if you like, with people that had been in football, and those are the people that I probably almost, what I'd say, agreed with. Even though we had different ideas about how you coach, they were passionate about football, they loved it. And now I was stepping into an environment where it was people that had got different career pathways, had different types of experiences, and I didn't necessarily agree with them, or we had the same view. And I started to realize, actually, these people could be really useful to me. And they were, I started to listen to some of their ideas and how they would teach and deliver something, and thought, actually, I wonder if that's transferable, and I could try that in the coaching workplace, and see how that knowledge then got transferred. And I think that's really important, that sort of diversity of network that you have. It's not always, for me, if you stick with people that you're friendly with, or people that have a similar knowledge or you agree with, you're really narrowing your boundaries in terms of what you can learn and what you can understand and the knowledge that you can gain. Actually look outside of where you feel socially comfortable with people, and people that completely disagree with your view, or have had these different experiences, because for me, it's only going to help you grow, and develop, and probably understand things a lot clearer, because the people that you're coaching will also have different views. They'll see things through a different lens, and you've got to interact with them because you're trying to get them to learn effectively. So for me, that diversity of network is really, really important.
It definitely is something that, obviously you're reiterating, that I've found as well, that I've probably had some of my best learning experiences not within football, with others who come from different backgrounds, aspects or topic knowledge. And it does really open your eyes to what's out there that's not just football. And I don't know about yourself, a quick example here is there was a period in my career where I had enough of football. You know, like if you'd gone on a seminar or you got a ticket and you think, I don't really want to go to the match today, or no, I'm quite happy not to learn about football today. And I think that's something that outside of people working in football, sometimes they don't understand that. I don't know if you've ever had that.
Yeah, definitely. I had a sort of time where, and this is probably jumping forward a little bit, where I was working at Oxford United, so I'd gone into a professional club now, and I was doing some work, and it was great in terms of I got exposure to a lot of different roles when I was at the club. So I got to work in the community department. I got to work with the first team. So like a real breadth of where you're at, but I also got to like paint the changing rooms and cut the grass. So you got exposure to like sort of every role. And then I got approached one day by the owner of the club, who also owned Wigan Warriors Rugby League Club. And he made me this fantastic offer to go and work in rugby. And I sort of, I was probably at a point where I was just sort of going, right, well, where am I going with my football? And I wanted something new and exciting and different. And so I took the job and went into rugby. And I've got to say, it was probably one of the best experiences I've had in terms of some of the exposure that I got there to something different. But I also got, it was quite interesting in terms of how rugby worked at the time. So the club that I went into had they'd got the biggest conversion rates in terms of young players developing in the club. So if you got to the age of 14 at Wigan Warriors, bar long-term injury, 100% of the players ended up in the Super League in rugby. 95% of them played for Wigan Warriors. The other 5% went to another club and played. So it was brilliant just to sort of see how they worked with young players. But I also got this experience of where how they wanted to develop their education programs, I didn't agree with. And I'd got my sort of own values and morals that I wanted to stick with. And they were doing something that I felt was ethically wrong. So I sort of questioned this, and it was probably only sort of stepping out of the environment that I was used to and being exposed to something else that I got that exposure, and I sort of questioned it, and probably got quite heated at times with people that I spoke to. But I think if I hadn't taken that step and been and done that, I think I'd have never gained some of the experiences that I had. I had quite an interesting conversation yesterday with so I'm trying to bring a new group of what we call our experts at FIFA into this pool of experts, and I've looked external to football because at the minute FIFA is very football orientated, and I said actually no, we need to expose ourselves to experts in different fields that can come in and give us insights into different areas. So they've come in and started questioning some of the things that we do. So I still think that's really important. And something that we spoke about was the top leaders or people that have been really successful or their careers have really jumped a stage are those that have got courage. And they, so if, for example, the game's not right for you at that particular time, and you have to take a step away, you have to be courageous with it and just go, do you know what? I'm going to go and find a different experience, because if I do want to come back to the game, this is going to give me some of those insights and experiences that I need. And I think at that particular point, I was probably, I was probably looking for something new anyway. But you have to be courageous and say, no, do you know what? I'm going to go and do it and experience it and try it out. And then it gave me a completely new pathway into the game at that point.
I think the key point from that bit of chat there is trying something new, being courageous, because what's the worst that can happen is key. And for anyone listening now, football doesn't have all the answers. It has some of it, I've learnt loads, for example, watching handball and working with a different country when I've been to Sweden a few times. But you have to step out your comfort zone to get those experiences, which, as Gareth just said there, will really help you in the long term, maybe with a fresh view or fresh eyes upon things, really. So take that on board as a bit of a thing of what are you doing now and what else is out there to help that. So, Gaz, you've shared a lot about how you've worked community, different sports, new experiences. How did you kind of then go, do you know what? I really need to make my place now in football, because obviously we're adults, life goes on, family pressures come in, and you have to make a point where you kind of go, I'm all in or I'm not, because you might have bills to pay. At what point did you kind of go, do you know what, this is what I've got to do now, and maybe move away from community into professional type game environments that you've been in?
Yeah, it's I suppose quite difficult, really. I've and I'd probably tell people to do this as well. So I've always been a bit of sort of dreamer, where I'll go, oh right, I'd love to do that. Okay, what do I need to do to get there? And sort of probably imagining myself being manager of a top side or working at the top end of the game. So I've always had that sort of imagination or dreamer aspect to sort of how I think, and I try and encourage that in people, and just sort of say, right, don't let anything hold you back. Be courageous with your dreams as well. So try and think about where you could get to. But I always remember there was a guy at the Premier League, and we'd been to a meeting, and he just came out with it one day and said to me, all right, what is it you want to do? So we had a conversation about it, and he went, okay, write it down. So I'd written it down, and then the next time we met, he was like, right, well, what are you going to do to get there? So almost started writing a strategic plan for myself. And I think we tend to do a lot of that, this strategic planning for, say a session that you're going to deliver. So you'll put the detail in there, or you've got a piece of work that you're doing, and you plan. So right, what work needs to take place up front? What are the players that I'm going to be working with? What are their individual needs? How am I going to look at? And then the bit we probably spend the least time on is thinking about that strategic plan for ourselves and what our career is going to look like. So I think that was probably a good prompt for me at that point to sort of say, right, these are the things that I need to do. This is where I need to plan. And I've got to be honest, that changes all the time. It's not something that's fixed. And I say, right, that's the vision. That's what I want to achieve. That's where I want to get to. That does change. But it was a really useful process to go through. And I think so when I left New Deal for Community, I'd gone to the Oxfordshire FA as county development manager and been exposed to lots of different parts of the game. And then I got the opportunity to go to Oxford United and work at a professional club. And I think at that point, there was bits of the job that I was doing that I was going, do you know what? I really, really like this. And I think when I left and went to Wigan Warriors, I knew straight away that I needed to be back in the professional game. I think there was a real sort of desire to go, right, I know what I want to do now. I want to work at the top level of the game. I want to work with elite players. And I think that's where I got that sort of desire from. But I think the part that's probably really important is I started to think about some structure that I could put behind it. So what are some of the things I need to do to get there? And I started to appreciate a lot of the things that I'd already done. So some of the voluntary work, some of the grassroots work that I'd done, going into schools, and probably thinking about, right, well, I need to maintain some of those. That's really important. I need to do that. However, this part's new to me, or I might need to do this bit of education. So probably started to take my own career quite seriously at that point.
I think the planning bit is key, and I always had, I suppose, a motivational thing that really helped me was someone said to me once, no one else is going to do it for you. And I always remember that. And having that plan, like you've said, really helped. So where do you want to go to next? Because, well, when I was 30, as an example, I'd have never said I'd have ended up as a university lecturer. But on the way down the line, I made that plan to do that because of constraints or where I wanted to be, and my experiences through football and education and other sports kind of linked in well. So really, thinking about yourself was kind of a key thing that Gaz said there, guys. And if it's something you want to make happen, you can do it, but you might have to be patient, and you might have to take some side steps or get some new experiences to get there. I think is the key. So another question then for you guys. So for the listeners on here, Gaz also worked at with his experiences from Oxford, Wigan, etc. From my understanding, Gaz, you went to Leicester City.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and Stoke City after that as kind of an academy role. Kind of tell us what job roles you did at Leicester City and Stoke.
Yeah, so if I just take you through those next steps. So when I left Wigan Warriors, I went to Leicester City, and I was probably at a point in my career where I was like, right, I definitely want to have some sort of coaching type role. And Leicester had got a position as head of education at the club, and I applied for the role, spoke to the academy director at the time, and because I've got a really clear understanding of what I wanted to do, I sort of said, look, I understand what the role is. However, I want an involvement in coaching. And at that time, they were just moving into the elite player performance plan stage at the Premier League. And so he said, look, we really need someone to head up coach education as well for the development of our coaches. So your role could be head of coach education, where you develop not just the players in terms of their formal education pathway, but also the coaches in terms of their education, their formal education pathway. So I went to Leicester in that capacity, and I think during that role, because I got exposure to coaching, seeing players on the day in, day out, how they worked, I got exposure to other positions as well at a football club. So really understanding what those roles are about, how you could really influence the game, the player and the coach. So I think at that point, I'd got a really clear understanding of what I wanted to be. It was absolutely, I wanted to be an academy director at good clubs. I wanted to be a Category 1 academy director. I saw that as the future role, and that was certainly my vision at that time. Right, how do I become an academy director? I got offered that opportunity at Bristol City, who were a Category 2 club at the time. So I was like, right, I'm going to have to take a step back. So for a Category 1 club, I'm going to have to go into a Category 2 club because this is offering me the pathway to become an academy director. And I was fortunate in terms of some of the steps I've made along the way. So when I was at Oxford, we'd won the league, and then I went to Wigan Warriors as performance director, and we won the league and the cup. And then when I went to Leicester, we got promoted to the Premier League, so it was really good. And I went to Bristol, and I'd not been there very long, and Leicester City phoned me up and said, look, the pathway at the time wasn't open to you to become academy director here. We understand, obviously, you've now left and gone to Bristol City. Would you come back as academy director? Which I said, look, I would love to come back, definitely. However, I was sort of quite clear in terms of you're going to have to wait. I'd already committed to Bristol City. I said, look, I need to make sure that I do this year, and I don't leave the club in the lurch. And these guys have offered me a pathway to become an academy director. I want to make sure that I look after them as well. So I spent the year at Bristol City as academy director. Very fortunate again, we won the league, and we went to Wembley and won the Autoglass Trophy, which again was a great experience. And then after that, I went back to Leicester City as academy director, which was probably a bit of a dream at the time, that I'd gone into a Category 1 and Category 1 club, and then my network really opened up. So when I went there, Claudio Ranieri came in with his staff. I became really good friends, and he introduced me to a number of other people and became really good friends with them. So the network then started to really develop in the elite game, and started to felt comfortable questioning some of the things that they did. And so this was fantastic. And obviously the Leicester City story in terms of winning the league was great. And then we came to year sort of 2.5 years into that role, and I had an approach to go back to Stoke City, where I'd been as a young scholar and a schoolboy, and the role opened up even further. So they offered me the same position as academy director, but almost to take an additional step into a leadership role at a club. So they wanted me to be head of the technical board, to oversee all player development, but also transfers and loans. So we had a technical director at the club who was our head of recruitment. So he would go out, watch players, make recommendations to me on the board, and then I would make a decision with the chief exec, first team manager, and the owners at the time, in terms of how much that would affect the club, how much it would affect individual players that were coming through in our system. And so when they offered me that role, that was probably the first time where I'd sort of said, or was really clear when I went to an interview to sort of say, right, what is it that you want to achieve? And we had some really good conversations about that. And I said, look, if I come in, this is what I can do. And I was probably quite confident at that point to sort of say, right, this is what I'll bring. This is what we're going to do. But the vision and the plan, I want to be my responsibility. So because they wanted to, so the owners were quite clear. They said, right, we want 11 players from Stoke-on-Trent or from our academy system to come through and play in the first team. And at that point, I think they'd had 1 in 10 years, a young lad called Ollie Shenton, who made his debut against Manchester City for about 3 minutes. So it was a bit of a challenge, and probably quite a challenge in terms of when I went there, they had really good staff. So A license, pro license coaches. The facilities were unbelievable. I used to sort of say to everyone, look, if I get someone on the driveway into the training ground, they will sign for Stoke City, because the facilities are wonderful. Probably befitting of probably a bigger club than Stoke City. But they'd not managed to get any players through. So it was almost like they weren't doing what it said on the tin. So my challenge then was to almost say, well, if we've got an academy, there needs to be some outcomes. We've got some deliverables. So we'd set this really clear vision in terms of what we wanted to achieve. We'd then put what the mission was going to look like, how we'd got there. So we'd released a mission statement. So then I probably became very much probably more of a leader than a coach. So even though I was in the coaching environment and I was affecting the coaching environment, it's almost like what I would call the head teacher syndrome, where actually you feel like you've become really good at something and you get promoted into a role where you don't do the thing you were really good at. And then it's managing your own mind around that and being comfortable that, yes, you've made the right decision. So that's sort of where I went in terms of my journey to becoming an academy director, and probably the role that I'd got in my vision to try and achieve long term.
So all that work before, where you'd learnt with other people, used your community and grassroots experiences, networked, and put a plan in place, was paying off really. And I think from what I was hearing there was, I suppose, it wasn't luck, it was by hard work and following the steps that you needed to do to get to where you are, really, because it's detriment to character, to kind of taking the opportunities that are presented to you. And I really like what you said there about Bristol, because football, we work in a world where some people will drop their commitments for an extra 20 quid. But on this example, you stayed true to honour a commitment, which probably holds really well in esteem of yourself, really. And I think that's word spreads, because the networks are really small, aren't they? Everyone knows each other. So if you'd have let someone down, that could have been really detrimental to actually getting you to where you wanted to be in the future.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think you get a sort of set of values or a way that you want to live your life, and I think making sure that you stay humble and you do stick to them. I think that's really important. But I think what you just said about the network is so small. I know a lot of people that You know, they're 100 times better coach than me. That say to me, right, well, how did you get into the position you're in now? And I've got to be honest, I would probably say the easiest bit is just be nice to everyone. Just get on with people and build relationships. And that relationship building for me, and gaining trust of people is really, really important. And having respect for what you're doing at a particular time or what other people are doing in their roles is hugely important, because I think football, and don't get me wrong, I have to remind people at FIFA about these things as well, where they'll talk about the elite game and I'm going, yeah, but don't forget the amateur game and the contribution that makes. That makes up 99.9% of the workforce for football, and the contribution that these people make actually are the people that are probably making the biggest contribution to our elite game, because of the players that they're developing, the coaches they're developing, the humility, ethics, values, morals that they're trying to embed in the game. They're things that stay with people all the way through, and it produces what we get as our end result. So now I think you're absolutely right, Russ. It's such a small world, and actually being sort of true and honest to how you are as a person is really, really important.
Guys, I don't know anyone who's ever said a bad word about you, and I know a lot of people as well. So it does back up really well about how you treat people. Is kind of what might be remembered or helped along the way. And I always remember from my time at West Brom, I don't know if you ever came across this, guy, was Dashwood's thing was, we'll help you to be a better player, but we're going to help you to be a better person first. And that's something that's really stuck with me. I don't know if you've came across that in any of your times or roles, or such a philosophy like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I still say it now. So when we're doing sessions with the technical directors, we're doing a lot of work at the minute around leadership, and probably the biggest part that we're doing the work on, and sort of saying this will have the biggest impact on your role, is about the person that you are, not about your knowledge of the game or your project planning or how you write a strategic plan. Actually, it's the person, and making sure that you get those things right. So just being emotionally intelligent, and thinking about others when you make decisions, or trying to see things through the lens of other people, are the bits that are hugely important. And in terms of the great leaders, they've got that. That's the bit that they've really, really got. So when you talk about great managers in the game, and I never experienced him, but when if people speak to me about Alex Ferguson, and probably the bit that they talk about is his man management, how he managed people, and I certainly had it with Claudio Ranieri. The first thing you would ever ask would be about my wife and children. It would never be about the game on Saturday, and for me that's that's the bit that really sort of shines through in people.
Absolutely. And something, for us listening to say, it's about you, how you make people feel. It will make a big difference in the world of coaching and football and where you want to go. So, final question from me before I have some questions from some of our network. How did it go down? So a guy who lives in, effectively, we know it as Dudley on the Sea, Stourport. How did that phone call go with, hi Gareth, you've got a job opportunity at FIFA. So how did this come about? How did it happen?
Yeah, it was probably quite a strange one, and probably quite reflective of what we've just talked about as well. So I had a recruitment company call me from Australia, and they'd been in touch with me before about a couple of other roles, and I'd not been keen on the roles that they'd wanted me to look at, but we'd maintained a really good relationship. I'd dealt with them properly. I'd never ignored any of their emails. I'd always responded correctly, and they got in touch with me and said, look, we've heard about this role. It's not one that we're recruiting for, but we think it fits your profile really well. So I was like, oh, right, okay. They said, yeah, it's, we'll send you the information. Go and have a look at it. You need to go through an application process for it. So I was like, right, okay, no problem. And interestingly enough, this agency didn't make any money out of doing that phone call, nothing. I'm guessing they're probably thinking long term that they may be able to offer me some sort of role in the future, or we maintain that relationship. But I went through a normal application process for the role, so I applied, and then it was an 8-month interview process, which I knew from the start it was going to be quite a long game that we'd have to play. So it was, I think, quite nerve-wracking the first couple of interviews. So one was online, and it was very much a HR business partner that interviewed me online. And then they said, oh, we'd like to take it to the next step. We need you to come into FIFA. And if you go to Zurich and go to the home of FIFA, you walk in, it's quite an intimidating building. It's very inspiring, but quite intimidating. And so I went there and had a panel interview with a number of different people from across the technical division. And then sort of each time I went, it was almost like you moved up to a new level of people interviewing you. And then I think it was probably interview 6, I think it was, where the ex-Croatian forwards, Zvonimir Boban, who was technical director at the time, he I had an interview with him, had the director of HR, and then probably about a panel of 4 or 5 other people. And I knew at that point that I was down to probably the last 2 or 3 people. And but I was quite confident. I'd definitely gone into the doing the interview process where I was like, look, if I fail this or I don't get the job, this is unbelievable experience. I'm getting interviewed by some really well-known people in the game. I feel under pressure when I'm trying to have to speak and give clarity over my ideas and where I see the global game going. So all the way through, I'd sort of maintained that. Probably I went to this last interview and I was like, right, this is probably the moment where I need to try and shine a little bit. And so Zvonimir is very much a football person. He wants to speak about the game, and he asked me a question quite early on, probably 2 or 3 minutes into the interview, about the game. And so I started talking about formations, and he just sort of went, right, stop. And I was like, right, okay. And he just went, right, everyone, you can leave the room now. So I was like, right, okay, this is just me and him. And we literally just pulled out a whiteboard with players on it, started playing around with how we'd like to play the game, my thoughts on some games that had taken place that weekend. He was a huge, has a huge connection to AC Milan at the time. He's now moved to AC Milan as sporting director, and wanted me to give my opinion on them. That was it for that last interview, the one that I probably put myself under the most pressure for. It became something very comfortable and something that I was used to speaking about. And I probably knew at that point, I think I've got a really good chance of getting this. And then a couple of days later, I got the phone call to say that we'd like to make you the offer to come into the role. But I think when I offered the role, it was this huge excitement that I've been offered this position, and it's great, and probably far beyond where I'd been dreaming that I could get to. But I knew there was going to be a huge sacrifice with it as well. So I knew that if I was going to go there, I'd probably, because they speak German, my languages aren't great. I was going to have to learn languages to work there. And I knew I probably wouldn't see my family a lot. So there was going to be this huge sacrifice again, one that you've taken as a young coach where you're out all the time and you're volunteering probably for little return. But now I was going to get a huge return, but I was going to have to make a sacrifice to be able to do it. So on one hand, it's great, but you almost have to be courageous again, where you go, this is the right thing to do at this time. I think the long-term benefits for my family will be huge. So yeah, that's sort of how it all came about, and it's been fantastic. It's really, given me some great opportunities. Some of the things that I've done and the people I've met and the people that I work with are just incredible, and just some of the people that are in our team that people know of, that it's a really fantastic experience, and one that I don't take for granted, and I have to try and remain humble, think about where I came from. And like I say, during lockdown, I've been and worked with my local village team, because I think I need to be in touch with the pitch still. So yeah, this was sort of my journey and where I am now.
I heard a rumor from a friend that we know mutually that you either A, share an office with, or B, have coffees with Arsene Wenger.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm really lucky. It's quite funny actually, because he's definitely a friend now. He's just a colleague, someone that comes in, and I think he's so when I talk about humility, he's great because he gets a huge salary from FIFA. He's had a vast amount of experience in the game. He could probably get away with coming into the office once in a blue moon, and just be almost a face of FIFA. And he's not like that. He comes in, he's there first thing in the morning from 8 o'clock. I leave at 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. Brings, he comes in virtually every day with an article out of the newspaper. Something's happened in the game, or my thoughts on something, and it can be something that's happened in a major tournament, but it can be something happening, a school program that's been delivered. He's a great example of someone that really understands the whole breadth of the game, still has that desire to be involved at whatever level it may be. So no, yeah, I really fortunate to have someone like that in our team, and that I get to work with on a daily basis. So yeah, really fortunate.
And let's remember here that you're in the position you're in through your own hard work, planning it out, but the experiences of coaching in grassroots, community, and people-centered type outcomes has really helped this journey and really helped you to get you where you're going. And I think for, if you're a student getting into football, if you're a grassroots coach, all the things you're doing that connect and build relationships and network are the right things. They're going to help you in the future. And sometimes that short-termism, where, let's say, for an example, I've had this experience, I'm sure many of you listening have, you're on the sideline, it's raining, and you think, why am I doing this? No one's helping me. But then you see the smile of those kids, or a parent comes to speak to you and says, oh, my son, he's been so much better at home. These small things are just the same things, but higher up in the game, and really helpful, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. It's someone referred to it to me as putting money in the bank. So you're almost investing in your future. I think you do these things, and you get little return at the time, other than those little moments of little Johnny smiling, or someone passing an exam at school, and the bit that probably got them through was that release of coming to your session and being able to relax and be themselves at that particular time. I think they're the bits that obviously take you on the journey. And I think when you look back and reflect as well, there's that realization that they were the biggest contributor. Yes, you need to build the knowledge and grow your network, but those are the bit that have probably made the biggest contribution, I think, when you get to those last parts of your journey.
Absolutely. I've got a couple of questions from the network of coaches that obviously work within my network of stuff. So the first one is, this is Wayne. Wayne's a coach at Stourbridge. He wants to know, he coaches under nines, okay? So he wants to know, he's heard in other countries that they have different formats. So Wales, for an example, are doing a 4v4 type game for foundation age groups, and then that goes to 5v5, 6v6. In your role at FIFA, what are the best formats, would you say, and why is there so much difference?
Yeah, I think probably gets affected by the sort of culture and environment that you're in. So if you go to South America, for example, you tend to have a lot of sort of hard court areas. So they tend to play a lot of futsal or small-sided game formats. If you go to Europe, they've got a culture that's probably embedded some of that South American link as well. So Portugal, Spain have that almost that futsal culture within their game. So if you look at the Spanish Federation, for example, the futsal federation is as big as the Spanish Federation, and they have it as a professional game. So there's obviously lots of different formats. So I think that's almost created from. It's slightly different in the professional game, because then you can start to look at what's having the biggest impact on players that you're developing. But I think in terms of community grassroots, people are really well resourced in terms of their ideas. So you get kids that turn up at a football pitch and there's only 2 of them there, so they'll play 1v1. But in terms of what's best, so when I've been in academy football, I think we've always looked at 1v1 being really important, 2v2 being really important at different phases of their development. Probably the important bit for me is really understanding the individual, the person, and what's best for them at that particular time. So I wouldn't necessarily say, right, these are the formats that you must play, and this is the golden ticket. I think the important bit is understanding what an individual needs at a particular time in the context of where they are in their development. So it's really difficult to sort of say this. However, I would say I've used probably every format available to me, and that's almost going beyond the bounds as well. So we had quite a large squad of under 15s at Bristol City, and they were a really interesting group because we couldn't ever get them out of the building. They would just want to be on the pitch all of the time. So I'd look out the window and they'd be playing headers and volleys or those type of things. So we had a social game with them. It was about 14 or 15 aside, but it was very much for a social outcome, just to keep them together as a group. So based on the outcome that you want to achieve for your development, just to look at different formats. But yeah, you're absolutely correct around different formats being established around the world, but it's usually based on their culture or the environment that they're in at that particular time.
Thanks. Okay, next one. So one of my students, which I've said to you before, is a lad called Jackson. He's from South Carolina. And he said to me that Gareth Jennings is the best coach I've ever had. And I was like, well, that's funny. I know him. So I thought I'd take this opportunity for Jackson to say, coaching abroad and getting your experiences in other countries, how important for maybe student coaches or coaches starting out in the game, does that help kind of your pathway or experiences of developing yourself?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I would really encourage people to try and I've tried to talk about different experiences that you can gain and try and get in a breadth of experiences. For me, this is huge. I think just in my role at FIFA, where I've been to different countries and worked and coached, and the different levels that I've been involved in, it's just been incredible. Really opened my eyes to new ideas and different languages and cultures, and it's certainly, I think it probably has been the biggest. Probably the biggest block of learning towards how I learn. So I've started to really think differently about things and have a wider view on things. So I went to the European Championships a few years ago now. So I'd done my pro license, and the following year a group was going to Poland to the under-21 European Championships. And I went, and Graham Potter was there, so the current Brighton manager was there, and I'd spoken to him about his time in Sweden, and he was there at the time. He was in Sweden at the time, and they'd just become a top top level club, but he'd started in at level 7, and he was a good coach. But I think the bit that really added to his experience and knowledge been that taking that step to go and work abroad. And he was probably the one that really encouraged me to say, oh, look, any opportunities to go abroad and work and develop your knowledge and experience. He was the one that probably sort of gave me the biggest message to say, yeah, go and do it. You should definitely go and have those experiences. So I think if there's any opportunities when you're a young coach coming through to go and coach in another country, or there's volunteering experiences in another country, I'd grab hold of those with both hands and say, look, it might seem like you're going off pathway slightly, however, it will contribute in the long run. So you're just putting more money in the bank for that long-term investment.
Yeah, definitely. I've had some great experiences in Sweden, Malta, Kosovo, South Korea as examples, and probably really shaped my coach philosophy. Final question then. This is from Tom. Tom is a foundation coach with Kingsley, and he does some kind of like fundamentals under fives work with something called playmakers. So he wants to know, across the world then in your role, do you find that there's a relevant age effect as we would find in England? So for those listening not quite sure what that is, if your birthday is in September, you are also playing with those whose birthday in August. So there could be like a 9 or 10 month gap between age groups, which sometimes disadvantages those with a later birthday. Is this something that you see across the world, or is it just an English problem?
No, it's was it Tom that you said?
Tom,
Russ?
yeah, Tom.
Yeah, Tom. It's a pandemic globally. It's the dates are different. So a lot of countries have got different dates and timelines, and when they start their school year or when the football year starts from. But it's a global problem, and it's quite interesting. I think the sort of study around it, where people have different types of competitions, or so for example, I've come across where there'll be age bandings, so where you were born in the year. So they might say, right, from January through till April, we'll have a tournament for that. Or they might mix it up and say, right, the January to April, or the first quarter years will play against the third quarter years. So where they were born in that particular year, and they'll compete against each other. I've seen some club formats where they do team selections, where they'll say, right, okay, we'll play an 8-a-side, but you must have 2 people from quarter 1, 2 people from quarter 2, 2 from quarter 3, and 2 from quarter 4. So people have got some really good ideas about how to support and develop it. And some people have gone in probably too far a direction as well. So if we try and sort of say, so we do a lot of work with in talent ID around trying to identify potential and looking at birth years. And there's been this real big drive around quarter 3 and quarter 4 birth dates and the potential that they could offer. And then you've almost ignored quarter 1 and quarter 2, and you go, well, hold on, don't just ignore those guys now and look at the late birthdays. Look at the value of both and where they are at that particular point compared to where the quarter 3 and quarter 4 when they get to that point. So it's a really big challenge. But yeah, it exists. It does exist globally, and there's some really interesting research in other sports as well. I think Malcolm Gladwell, one of his books has got a really good piece around relative age effect, and I'll try and get the title and share it with Russ so we can get over to you, Tom.
One of the follow-ups we'll have from this, one of my other friends who's coming on the conversation soon, is called Martin Harrison, who's a bit of an expert for this for the female game and some of the work with Talent ID. And he works for Manchester City as the technical director for women. And yeah, you know, the data says if you're an earlier birthday, you pretend to be in the talent or the academy type system, but yet it's a balanced approach at getting from there to professional game, really. So yeah, it's an interesting topic and a good question, Tom, and thanks that you asked it.
Yeah. I think we had a really interesting concept for us at Stoke. We found 80% of our academy players were quarter 1 and quarter 2 birthdays, but the players that actually achieved professional contracts predominantly came from Q3, Q4. Those that had really had really been challenged as part of their development, they'd come through. So it'd be interesting to know from the women's game if they have a similar concept. But yeah, it was quite interesting. The pool of players that come through is a lot smaller, but what they'd achieved in the long run had actually almost been the reverse of that, where they'd received the hardest challenge because they'd had to cope and strive, and they'd come through at the end. So it'd be interesting just how that looks in the women's game, and if Tom's got any reflection on that, I'd really like him to share them through you. That'd be good.
Cool. And remember the parent network, Gaz. I will get my friend Martin to touch base with you as well with the women's game. So at least then they'll be joining the full circle. So Gaz, that's been a really enjoyable chat, and hopefully for listeners, you know, we've kind of looking how what you do now does pay off in the future. And, you know, I think I might title this conversation Foundations to FIFA, because what you're coaching or where you're coaching now might not be necessarily where you're going to be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And those bits will really pay off with growing your network, trying new experiences and being adventurous or bold, but also just being a nice person. Use those personal skills to kind of align in those relationships you gain and those networks that you build, and it will really pay off. Gaz, thank you for being a part of Black Country Coaches Club in partnership with BRM Solutions, who are doing our technical help and support here. Hopefully we keep in touch, and I'm sure we will, as we have done really well for 16 years, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you very much, Russ, and obviously thanks to Ben as well. So thanks, guys. I wish you all well on your coaching journey.
Thank you.